You know, in our journey towards spiritual maturity, it's mandatory that we learn early on that God can be trusted. He takes care of his children, even when we're ignorant and disobedient and faithless. God is faithful. The children of Israel left Egypt in the middle of the Jewish month of Nisan, which pretty well corresponds to the middle of April. Turning south along the Gulf of Suez, they marched till their water ran out at Marah. There, you will remember, they learned the lesson of purging. From Marah, they continued south, heading toward Mount Sinai. There, Moses had encountered God at the burning bush. Remember, Moses had been that way many times before during the 40 years that he lived in the Sinai, herding sheep and goats for his father-in-law Jethro. The lesson we're going to learn today is the lesson of provision. They were trudging south toward Elim, a place described in the Bible as a place of 12 springs and 70 palm trees. But here's the thing. God is going to meet us at every corner. If you will keep pushing forward, God will provide even at the last minute. Now come with me now. Listen in as we approach Elim. On the way, we stopped at a desert acacia tree where we rested. You find these amazing trees scattered throughout the Sinai. Remember, it was from the wood of the acacia that Moses formed the Ark of the Covenant. This particular tree where we stopped, so I could teach, is in the bottom of a huge wadi, a dry riverbed or a gulch, a deep canyon between two towering granite mountains. Notice the roots of the tree, which have been exposed by the raging water which flows through there on rare occasion. And learn the lesson of putting your roots down and trusting in God's provision. Nothing in this desert can live for long on surface water. The water doesn't soak in, it moves in a hurry. We're sitting now in the midst of a great wadi on mountains on each side, and yet in the midst of this is greenery. Here's a tree, an acacia tree, a lowly acacia tree. The source of water, however, obviously is underground, it's not surface. So many people come into the wilderness and feel if they can only find a pool of water that they can drink from, that they can live, that they can make it. Our own wildernesses are like that. We're constantly looking for that which is obvious. And yet the real nourishment is under the ground. It's never found on the surface. The roots, such as the roots of this acacia tree, are the secret to the life and the greenery of this tree. The spiritual man, David once said, is like a tree that's planted by the rivers of water or planted by streams of water that yields or brings forth its fruit in its season. And yet, here in the Sinai, there are no streams of water. There's not a single river in all of the Sinai. There's just these dry riverbeds. And yet there will be times when it'll rain. And when it rains, these riverbeds will fill up completely and entirely with water, rushing through on its way to the sea, oftentimes doing what it has done here, which is to pile the rocks around the roots of the tree or even expose the roots of the tree. The spiritual man, and the lesson is very plain for us, the spiritual man does not need constant nourishment or a constant flow. The spiritual man doesn't need to be watered every day. He prospers even when the skies are cloudless, as they are today, and even when the land is parched. Here we see the perfect example in the acacia tree, this marvelous tree that the Ark of the Covenant was carved from in the Sinai. Its roots running 30 to 50 feet into the ground. And so even though when there's long periods without water, it goes for years without rain at all, this tree continues to flourish. It continues to flourish because it's put its roots down. I think if the wilderness is to say anything to those of us who are wandering through it, fellow searchers, fellow pilgrims, it needs to say that we need to put our roots down. Drinking from the waters of the Nile is not enough. Children of Israel needed to learn to put their roots down, as this tree has done. Always searching, always looking for that which will constantly nourish, not being content to live on surface water, which can often be polluted, but rather living as a tree, living by the rivers of living water, drawing forth and therefore bearing fruit in its season. This acacia tree, gnarled and stubby as it is, perhaps 150, 200 years old, still putting forth green shoots as this one is doing. And if we would look high in the branches, we would see the little yellow blossoms. To be sure, there's thorns. It's not very beautiful to look at. And yet God chose this tree to be the container for the most holy thing that would happen, the Ark of the Covenant. For each one of us who are pilgrims, we need to learn to put our roots down. Job said it best many, many years ago. There is hope for a tree. If it's cut down, it will sprout again. And its new shoots will not fail. Its roots may grow old in the ground, and its stump die in the soil, and yet at the scent of water, it will bud and put forth shoots like a plant.